Hello, this is Steve Houghton, the Irritated American. And what I'd like to talk to you about today is the ongoing war in Ukraine. When I last spoke with you about this, it was February the 22nd, and the war had not yet begun, though Russian forces had entered the Donetsk and Luhansk republics, so-called the Soviet People's Republic of Donetsk and Luhansk. Um, but the invasion proper had not yet begun. And of course, at that point, I was saying, well, what we should have done was declare a no-fly zone over the western half of Ukraine. And I want to emphasize that I no longer believe that's what we should be doing. It's one thing to tell people in advance that if you do something, we're going to shoot you down. And it's another, once they've started doing it, telling them stop or we're going to shoot you down. One is, much safer, frankly, than the other. So what do I think we should be doing? First of all, what I think we should be doing is supplying the Ukraine with more weaponry than in fact we are. I was very disappointed that we chose not to go through with the deal with Poland for the Soviet jets that were in their possession, that they were willing to turn over to the Ukrainian government in exchange for F-16s from the United States. So that's one thing. Then there's the question of the S-300 air defense missiles, which I think, we should definitely be turning over to them. And the other issue that I have is more along the lines of heavier combat equipment. The fact of the matter is that the United States has thousands of M1 tanks that are not deployed with our units, of course, because the Cold War Army was much larger. And I think it's probably a mistake not to transfer about 800 of them, enough to equip approximately 2 brigades, to the Ukraine. Now, we would probably have to deploy them first to somewhere like Germany and bring Ukrainian operators in for training, and then transport them and their equipment across the border into Ukraine. Obviously, across several intermediate countries, and then across the Ukrainian border into Ukraine. But 2 armor brigades might actually be quite impactful for the course of the war. And so, I think that we need to really consider that, because I think, the initial expectation of everyone was that the Ukrainians would fight hard, but there was just no hope the Russians were going to win. And I think that conclusion is now very much in doubt. The Russian advance seems to be stalled. Now they may just be resupplying before engaging in fresh offensive operations. It's hard to say, but their casualties have been heavy. So there's a real question that maybe if we gave enough support to the Ukrainians, they could not only defend themselves but actually push the Russians all the way out of Ukraine, including the occupied territories and Crimea, which is also an occupied territory. So, I think that's the first thing. We need to really get serious about arming the Ukraine. And second of all, as I mentioned in my previous video, we need to get serious about, forward deploying forces from NATO. Now, that's starting to happen. So, I don't want to talk that. My opinion is still the same. We need to have 3 forward deployed brigades in the Baltic that can be formed up with the active and reserve formations of the Baltic republics to form a corps. We need to have a forward deployed U.S. division in Poland to help to form 2 corps or 1 very large corps with the Polish army. We need to have NATO deploy 3 brigades into the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, to 1 each to form a division with the 2 brigades of each of those countries' armies. That would be another corps in the central area. And then in Romania, we need to have a division, either a US division or a composite division, or maybe a British or French division, possibly even a Spanish division. The Spanish army is large enough to do that. And then the same thing we need a division of some kind, a NATO division in Germany to form a corps with the German army. And, in other words, we need to have formations ready to go in case the Russians try and advance further. Now, the events of the last 3 weeks give hope that maybe the Russians are not in as good a shape militarily as we had thought. And I forget if I read it or heard it, but there was an interesting analysis I came across that seemed to suggest that the Russians' real problem is that they've spent so much money on their nuclear forces and on their navy, neither of which is particularly useful to them in the Ukraine, that means that the armies had to do with a lot less. And certainly, a lot of their advanced equipment that they've been parading around has really never, advanced beyond sort of showroom floor examples. What is the T-14 tank and some of their most advanced fighter aircraft and so on. So, there's real hope that maybe the Russians are, well, not a paper tiger or paper bear in this case, might actually be weaker than they appear. Certainly their performance in Ukraine has not covered them with glory, which, glory to Ukraine, by the way. But we need to have our forces ready so that if the Russians do come across, then there's no question that we've got forces under UN commanders, not UN, NATO commanders that that will be ready to meet any such aggression. I think that's my general point of view. And then of course there's the whole energy thing. I think I may have mentioned this last time, but it's kind of obvious that one of the great weaknesses of NATO's position has been that Europe has gotten itself dependent on Russian oil, and we to a lesser degree actually do import Russian oil. Pardon me. But the solution to this problem, obviously in the short term, the United States needs to increase oil and gas production from fracking. The Biden administration needs to, auction off additional oil leases. The fact of the matter is that it is in fact Biden administration policy to try and cut U.S. oil production, and that's, in this context at least, totally insane. And in fact, it's totally insane until we build enough nuclear power plants to replace more carbon-intensive forms of power. And I guess I should discuss the wind and solar thing. I can be a little crude about it and call it people's wind and solar fetish, but that's not totally fair. There are areas where solar power makes sense, where you are not where there's enough solar intensity, right? And usually that means not so much cloudy weather and lots of daylight. So there are areas, and also areas where you're not farming, because obviously if you're farming, you're already using the sunlight. But so there are areas where that can be done. And there are areas where the wind is strong enough and the air dense enough to push turbine blades and generate electricity. Though, of course, both of these sources have the serious problem that they're highly intermittent. But it is conceivable that some areas of the country could get substantial portions of their power from that. But it's not true that the whole country can get its energy that way. So we need at least 400 nuclear power plants. And, what Congress needs to do is cut through the red tape so that it's much cheaper, because what they could do is they should find 400 good sites and do all buy them do all of the environmental impact studies in advance, you know, and then auction them off to anyone who's willing to build a nuclear power plant there and operate it. You know, I mean, we need nuclear power. This is not, and it's not just us. Europe needs it too, right? I mean, Europe needs it more than we do. I mean, I'm saying, you know, there's only so many places that you know, solar makes sense. Well, any place north of Chicago, solar makes no sense, not only from an economic point of view, but the production of the solar panels themselves is so carbon intensive that north of Chicago, you're not saving on carbon emissions by putting up solar panels. You're just not. Wind, maybe, but not solar panels. So, like, you know, you just have to be serious about this. And, you know, Europe, you know, is basically all north of Chicago. I mean, not every part of it, not Southern Europe, obviously. There's some possibility of like Italy and stuff like that. But, you know, Northern Europe, Western Europe are too far north. So that's just not a viable strategy, which they, to a certain degree, I think, kind of realized. I mean, that's why the Germans went in so hard for wind, though they also did solar, which I never understood at all. Anyway, but my point is, energy policy is important. So anyway, that's where we are with Ukraine. I think we have to say, you know, besides the fact that, you know, we're talking about this, about what we should do, you know, I think it's important to realize what a total and utter disaster this has been for the people of Ukraine, and, you know, for whom it has been a total disaster. I mean, their country is being disassembled with high explosives. It's been a total disaster for them. I mean, I don't like to overly dwell on it, but, you know, the stories that are coming out about, you know, children being killed and stuff are just heartrending. And also, for you know, I mean, the fact of the matter is, most of the Russian soldiers are there because they've been ordered there. You know, they would be shot if they resisted. So, you know, I think we should. It's a disaster for Russia too. It has, you know, it's already cost them the lives of 14,000 soldiers, more than they lost in the entire period of their war in Afghanistan in the 80s. You know, it's a horrific loss for them. And it has also caused, you know, a huge brain drain. A lot of people have escaped from Russia just because they don't want to put up with Putin and his bullshit anymore. Now, the last thing, having said that we need to think about the casualties of this war so far and mourn them, I think the last thing we have to do, and I should have said this earlier in the video, but I didn't, is, you know, we have to build a bridge for Putin to climb down on. You know, I mean, the fact of the matter is, you know, it's all good and well to say that his forces are committing war crimes in Ukraine. And I don't say that that's not true, though some people like to be a little liberal about what they consider a war crime, which sort of turns it from useful distinction to propaganda term. But that they have occurred. I mean, shelling a maternity hospital that's bloody well marked as a maternity hospital is clearly a war crime. There's no doubt of that. But the fact of the matter is, calling Vladimir Putin a war criminal is not helpful. It doesn't do any good. The fact of the matter is, Vladimir Putin controls 6,000 nuclear weapons. You know, shaking our finger at him is not going to do any good. Making him think that we're going to try him for war crimes is not going to do any good. Okay? You know, what we need to do is find a way for him and his closest cronies to move to China to enjoy their ill-gotten wealth while leaving the rest of the Russians alone, you know, and surrendering control over their nukes. And, you know, with a promise that we're not going to prosecute them despite the fact that they're war criminals. Right? I mean, so actually it would have been easier if the president had not said, he should have just been like, no comment, or, you know, that's not the important issue right now. The fact of the matter is that Putin has to be given a way out, because, I mean, his negotiations with, the Ukrainian government are all good and well. But the fact of the matter is that, he can't, anyone who has read any Russian history knows what happens to Russian leaders who lose wars. And the best thing that happens to them is that they manage to, in the case of Nicholas II, he lost the Russo-Japanese War, and he managed to hold on to power for 12 more years before he was finally deposed and then later executed, back really for losing the First World War. But that's the best case scenario for Vladimir Putin, right? It's not very encouraging. And also, Tsar Nicholas had lost a considerable amount of power, right? He had to institute the State Duma and so on. So, but what's much more likely, because I think his administration is more like this, is what happened to the Emperor Paul, which is that he was quietly assassinated, and that's happened more than once. That's often the history of dictatorships. When things go bad, the leader gets killed, and Vladimir Putin must know that. And so what we need to be finding for him is a way for him to escape with his life and his ill-gotten gains and to never trouble the world again. That's what we want. Sure, in the interests of justice, it would be great if we could, put Vladimir Putin on trial for violating the Kellogg-Briand Pact, and starting an unjustified aggressive war. But the fact of the matter is that we can't. So, because he's got nukes, you have to compromise with people who have nukes. Now, you have to make sure that you don't get into the habit of compromising with them too far. But, we are not going to ask for Vladimir Putin's head unless he gets overthrown by his own people first, in which case, let's go for it. But otherwise, we need to find a way to get him to give up, and so anyway, I could keep rambling on about that. Anyway, God bless you all, God bless the United States, and glory to Ukraine. Bye-bye. Two other things that I think need to be discussed. The first is, just in case anyone is falling for this, the whole idea that the reason that the Russians, that Mr. Putin has chosen to invade Ukraine is because of NATO expansion is preposterous. The fact of the matter is that everyone knew that NATO had no intention of admitting Ukraine to NATO, at least until it managed to get its act together as far as corruption went. Its application had been stalled for more than a decade. It wasn't happening. And Putin knew it wasn't happening. So that's not why he invaded Ukraine. He invaded Ukraine, as he's quite publicly stated, because he doesn't think that the Ukrainians are a separate people and that their state basically has no right to exist. That's why he invaded. Secondly, I want to speak out against this preposterous canceling of people who are dead, especially. It's I think we have to be careful about canceling people, period. But this idea that we shouldn't play Tchaikovsky's music because Putin has invaded Ukraine is insane. And the same thing about is happening with Yuri Gagarin. Some space conference has removed his name from an event. Yuri Gagarin is dead. He has not invaded Ukraine. He was a citizen of the Soviet Union, not of the Russian Federation. Anyway, this is just silly. It doesn't do anyone good. It doesn't help. It just makes people look like lunatics. Anyway, have a nice day. Bye.